In 1976, which was quite a long time ago, many of you were either old people dying, waiting to be reborn, or hanging out in the astral world without even a thought yet. I was a more or less functioning young person in that time. And I had joined Ananda, which at that time was Ananda Village, which is the community many of you know up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. I'd been living there for 5 years at that point, 1976. It was June, it was either the 24th or the 26th, I can't quite remember, or that date might be completely wrong. California had been in a state of drought for 6 or 7 years, which you really notice when you live out, as we did, in a rural area, because everything is just tinder dry. The trees, everything, very, very dry. On that particular morning, a county vehicle with, there's something on a car at that point on a truck called a spark arrestor, which keeps everything which could cause trouble contained, but it was broken, whatever it was, and it went down a country road right downhill from where Ananda Village was. One of the sparks flew off of the truck and it ignited the dry grass, and the dry grass burst into flames and it began to burn. We lived in Ananda Village still is, and God knows now we're living with it all the time, this forest fire reality. It wasn't nearly as common then, but we knew about it. It was always in the back somewhere, and we didn't have any insurance because insurance was prohibitively expensive given the level of finances that we had at that time. And that fire started burning on grass that was unrelated to our community, but it was downhill from our community. Fire burns uphill. And to make it worse, there was a pattern of weather, which is at a certain time of day, the wind would come from a certain direction, which was actually from the bottom of the hill up. So there we are at Ananda Village. We're living this, at that time, utterly idyllic life. The fact that it was physically primitive, simple is the nice word, but primitive is actually the real word for it. Very, very primitive. We had very few buildings. We were struggling. There were 22 houses at the farm at that point. The farm is what is now the community. There were 22 houses at the community area. There was the monastery and there was the retreat, 3 separate distinct areas. But most of us were, but I was just living in a state of, it was the bliss bunny period is what we would call that, where everything was always just so absolutely wonderful, no matter what happened. Actually, I'm still in the bliss bunny phase. Everything is still absolutely wonderful, no matter what happens. But we were very inexperienced with life, most of us. I came when I was 24. I never really did anything. I never really have done anything outside of Ananda. This has been my life. So we had a very, very positive, joyful expectation that everything would always work out. And after all, we were so nice. So this fire is burning, and we all, some of us, went up to the highest point of Ananda at that, which is what is called now Rajasi Ridge, Sunset Meadow. Some of you might know these places. The highest point, and the fire was coming up that hill. And we were there. We had all this fire protection gear. Somehow we'd gotten these cotton jackets. They had little mandarin collars with long sleeves. This was just after, Stephen, still during the Vietnam War. So they looked very oriental, and they looked kind of like the little communist jackets that they wore in Vietnam. So we're all like dressed in those things, and we have our little tools. Some people have these water backpacks, and we're going to fight the fire. This is something we'd actually done before. Just periodically there would be these, the bell would ring and you'd run out with your little on and go out there to do this. So the fire's coming up that hill, and I was standing there with Jyotish, as I recall, and there's this absolute belief that bad things don't happen to good people. And we're good people. We're building this community. We're working so hard. But I'm a good person, but I'm not a stupid person. There's acres of absolute dry grass downhill from where I'm standing, and the wind is beginning to get behind that fire, and then fire makes its own weather, like this. I just remember, I said to Jyotish, I said, Jyotish, this looks like it's going to burn Ananda. He says, yeah, could happen. Like, wow, it was like the first time in my young life that the idea that something really bad could happen to me, like this, or to what I loved, which was Ananda. So we all got out there, and there was a sort of I guess it was a dirt road. We're scraping this fire line, you know, like this, and the fire comes up close. And I heard it chuckle. I mean, fires don't actually chuckle, but I heard it chuckle. It walked up and it kind of looked at our fire line. It said, ha ha, and then it just jumped right over it. So now we're standing in our beautifully cleared out area, but the fire is in front and in back of us. And we're good people, but we're not stupid. You know, this is not a good situation. It wasn't flaming because it was just grass. So we got out of there. Then we watched it streak this way, and there was, at that time, all the houses were really in dense forest, we learned. And the fire goes to the bottom of the line of trees where most of the houses are. It shoots up the tree just faster than you can see because the thing is so dry. And then it does something which I learned is called tree topping, which it starts going across the top. I mean, all this is, if it wasn't your home, is all really impressive. And so it goes across like that, and then we all really saw what was going to happen, and the whole thing shifted from trying to stop it to trying to save what we could. And everybody's scattering in all directions to go into those homes. Nobody's at home, it's the middle of the day, so you got to go into somebody else's house and have about 5 minutes to think, what might they want if they were here? It was an adventure, let's put it like that. At that time, I was in charge of the publications business, which was in the building which is now called Hansa Temple, halfway up the hill. Somehow or another, I got all the way down the hill from there, gathered some people, and then just started running up the hill to get what we could out of the publications building, because now this is where the fire is heading. We get a big truck, we get it there, and we go into the building. This is before computers. So we start grabbing all the negatives for the books. We start grabbing all the recordings that we can get, you know, everything. But literally running up the hill like this, I'm saying to the person next to me, the mailing list was on metal plates at that point. I said, take the mailing list first, because we're going to need help rebuilding. So it was just the thought in my mind that, okay, the fire can wipe us out, but that won't stop us. But we're going to need all those names because we're going to need help. So then we start, you know, just sort of down in order, trying to throw into the truck everything that can't be replaced. And we had this huge press that we'd bought. It must have weighed 10,000 pounds. I remember pushing on it, you know, like, can we do this? And, you know, if wiser heads than mine said, I don't think so. But then I saw someone pick up this copy machine. I shouted, leave that, it's rented. You don't take any space for that. And, you know, this whole thing, we loaded the truck, it went back down the hill. Just as it happened, the fire burned right to the edge of that building. The firemen lit a backfire in the grass. So what was taken down actually was private homes. 22 of 23, 23 of 24, something like that. One of the decent buildings that was left standing. 2 months later, a giant oak fell on it and smashed almost all of it. It was like Divine Mother said, oops, left one. You know, just like that. It was something to remember. And it became a really big moment in Ananda's history. It purged, I wrote about it in the book Light Bearer. You can read more about it. It was really a marvelous experience. It was exhausting. By the end of that summer, we were so tired. We were just so tired. I remember just on a level that it was really hard to imagine how exhausted we were. It was sort of like you had to realize, you know, what we'd been through. I lived in the monastery. I hardly owned anything anyway. The monastery wasn't touched, but people lost everything. Jyotish and Devi lost absolutely everything. Their child was 10 days old. Everything was taken from them. And her mother called and said, Devi's mom Well, you certainly got the babies things out. No, Mother, we didn't. Well, you got the picture albums. No, Mother. Then she said, Mother, go to the fireplace, pick up a handful of ashes. She said, that's what we have, really, because it happened like that. Okay. Now, at another time, completely seemingly unrelated, I'll tie this together in a minute, there was a study that was published in a magazine, and it said that a woman over 40 had a better chance of being killed by a terrorist than she did of ever getting married again. Now, first question is, whoever did the study and why, and on what possible basis did they do this? But it caused a lot of distress over for unmarried women over 40, who had to decide whether they were going to be spinsters for the rest of their lives or be killed by a terrorist, and which really would be worse. Bear in mind, terrorism was not even very common in those days. Now it's more common, but then it was really remote. And so when this little kerfuffle was going through America, as America is so good at creating these kerfuffles over God knows what, Swami made an extremely interesting comment, which I've never forgotten. He said, there is no such thing as statistics, he said. There is only individual karma. Now that is really worth thinking about, isn't it? Your odds are not better or worse because some statistician has done the math. Odds are 100% exactly whatever your destiny is. So we have this reality going on our planet, which has been going on for a very long time, and it's being led from the West. It's being led from our country to a large extent, but the whole world is in it now, where we're always trying to calculate what are our chances. We're always trying to sort of make deals with the universe. What are our chances? Standing up there with Jyotish, watching that fire come up, that was a real moment for me. It was a real moment because some part of me was still, well, I won't say still, but I hadn't even examined the thought. I'm a good person. I'm doing a good work. I'm living for God. Therefore, I give him a few kriyas. He protects me from everything I don't want. Right? Isn't that the deal? I've written out this contract. I have put it in my security box. I put it in the bank. I have a copy over here in my file and one under my bed. Except when I look at the contract, there's no signature on it but mine. Big flourish, this is what I want. And the universe says, what do I care what you want? Divine Mother says, I want for you God realization. You want for yourself these little toys and little securities. Well, it's understandable that we do. We don't like to suffer, and even more profoundly and deeply, we don't want the people we love to suffer. It's in many ways it's worse. It's easier if it's yourself. It's much harder if you're helplessly watching someone you love have to go through something that seems very, very difficult for him. It's not as if Divine Mother herself is indifferent to our sufferings. It's not as if God imposes suffering on us just for the fun of it. But this life that we're living, this story that we're in, this incredible drama, it's a big story. And it has a point. And what's been happening to our planet that is making us all so confused, this is Kali Yuga, the age of matter, the age of form, the age of fixed dogmas and fixed realities. We're moving into an age of energy. And in the age of energy, it's the actual reality of things. It's not like we can just get it all fixed up. Here's in our reading today, the Pharisees come to Jesus and they complain, you're not following all the exact rules, because the rules are the definition. And Jesus just dismisses them with very fierce language. He said, these little things are not the definition, it's who we are in our consciousness. And as a planet, as a culture, and each one of us individually, we have to fight this all the time. This is the cutting edge of the battle, which is, can we just get this world to cooperate with us? Or do we have to learn how to cooperate with a greater reality? And all the masters and all the psychics and all the predictive everybody's talk about tempestuous times. In 1952, Yogananda declared at a Sunday service just like this, in a smaller chapel than this one, "You don't know what a terrible cataclysm is coming." Wow, Zowie, who would come the next Sunday? Jeez. You know, Master said it was, Swamiji said, who was there, he said it was just, Master put the entire power of his voice into declaring, and he didn't do it just to scare people. He wasn't there just to make a dramatic story. He was saying to people, wake up. You're looking for your security in the wrong place. You think that you're going to be successful if you can just get it organized and close every possible door, to untoward things happening. And Master said, you don't know what a cataclysm is coming. He spoke of economic changes, of wars. Swami Kriyananda, all through his life, would talk about these things practically every New Year. Swami would say, I wonder if this is the year. 1971. 1972, 1973, 1974. Maybe 1974 is the year when the terrible cataclysm comes. Well, it didn't, and it hasn't. In fact, Swamiji, who was quite easily, he could make fun of himself. He and Jyotish sort of had this, what do you say? They kept score. Every time someone predicted that there would be a terrible cataclysmic earthquake, they would predict that there wasn't going to be one. And they were always right. Because it hasn't happened yet. Because time is confusing and people's actions mitigate karma. But it will come. Because Master declared it and too many others did. And because common sense tells us that it's going to. You cannot just keep pushing and 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 pushing in one direction of I want, I will get, I will have. What's going on politically in our country and all countries these days is just a perfect indication. It's like everybody wants for themselves. Everybody wants to make the world the way they think it ought to be. And even when any kind of higher reality is referred to, it's only self-serving. It's God wants what I want. It's not I would like to do what God wants. It's that I know that God wants what I want, and God is telling me to impose upon you what He wants because I want, and it just goes on and on. Not everybody, because there is an equally powerful and ultimately will be more powerful reaction toward the light. But in the meantime, we live in interesting times. And all of us, everybody, I'm sure all of you have been reading the same health reports and the statistics about what we can expect about these little creatures that are now sort of invading our world. Master said something extremely odd, and I have no idea even how to think about that. He said sometimes these epidemics that come through, because these are living creatures. This little virus that we've been learning about, what was he called? COVID-19 now? Now he has a name. He's right there, and I've seen little pictures of him. Have you seen little pictures of him? With his little spongy body and his little things, searching for my lungs to make me sick. These are living creatures. Master said that these creatures come actually from dark astral worlds. And he said sometimes they come in order to be annihilated. Now, what are we supposed to think about that? They invade our planet and then we wipe them out. Because everything is evolving. If Master remembers all the way back to being a diamond, we must have probably been bacterium also at some point or another. In fact, in a talk about reincarnation, Swami talked about, can you go backward from the human level? Can you go back to being an animal? And Master Swami was talking about some of the things that happened I guess in about 2008 maybe, when there was so much manipulation of the economic market and many people got very rich without any concern for anything that happened. He said those people will be born like as tigers in their next lifetime. I mean, just some kind of bloodthirsty creatures without regard. He said, but the punishment of that is, you see, part of your consciousness remembers that you used to be more. I'll tell you a weird story about that. There's a man, he's passed away now, Swami Ananda is his name. He was a Swiss man who read Autobiography of a Yogi on March 7th, 1952, the day that Master left his body. So he was in Switzerland and he would have gone to see Master, but Master had just died. So he walked to India. When he got to the border, these were different times, they asked him, who are you, what are you here? He said, well, I'm here for God. And they just let him walk into India, and he never left. And he is a very deep disciple, and many of us knew him, and he had a little, or at least went to see him. He lived in this small house near Raniket, Dehradun, somewhere up there. And at some point, a taxi cab drew up to his ashram, and a small dog got out of the taxi. Somebody had sent this dog to him. Now, in the Mahabharata at the end, when the Pandavas are going off to heaven, Yudhishthira, the greatest hero, is followed by a dog. And in the end, Yudhishthira is going to be allowed into heaven, but not the dog. And so Yudhishthira says, I will not go to heaven. He has been even my brothers have left me and died, but this dog alone has followed me. And it turns out this dog is an incarnation of Lord Dharma, and Yudhishthira is, the doors of heaven open and he and the dog walk in like this. So when this dog arrives at Gyanananda's place, he named him Dharma. What else is he going to name him? And this dog became his responsibility, and he intuited that this was a fallen human being who had become a dog. The dog was really obnoxious. It was just one of those little yapping dogs that would kind of nip at your heels. It was just, it made being there an adventure because of that little dog. But there was a characteristic about this dog, is that it wouldn't eat if anyone else was around, because, Gyanananda said, it was so embarrassed. If you've been a human being, to have to just put your snout into the food and just lap it up like that. So if anyone was around, they would put up a little screen and the dog would go behind and he would eat, because he couldn't eat in front of anyone because he was so embarrassed. You know? I don't know how to think about this, but Swamiji, talking about this sort of thing, he also said, and if you're really, really evil, you could go back to the level of being a germ. You could be thrown back to the level of being a germ. So we are, now I'm going to come back to where we are. We have these little viruses who are out to get us. They're out to disrupt our lives. They're out to bring about a complete revolution in who we think we are and how we think we live and what we think is important. I like to laugh. You know, the comedians sometimes summarize the news perfectly. One of the comedians said, one of those, news comedians said, this virus is showing us what each country is about. In China, the virus has come and all manufacturing has shut down. The virus has arrived in Italy, and now there's no fashion shows and no soccer games. At least, you can always laugh no matter what is going on. But it's not a joke. It's not a joke at all, because something may happen, and if it doesn't happen this time, it'll happen sometime, because who is in charge? Who is in charge? Who am I? How do I even know what is good for me? I certainly know what I want. There's no question about that. I know what I want. Absolutely. But God doesn't care what we want. God cares about what we really want, which is freedom. We want freedom from all fear. We want to transcend this insane, crazy world in which we live, in which all these forces are always fighting each other. A universe, a planet
This is how Master put it at one point. It's a fascinating way to think about it. We are at a certain stage of evolution, and there's a balance between light and dark. And that balance shifts as the yuga shifts, as we get into a higher age. Different planets have a greater proportion of light versus darkness, but that balance is always there. And we're rising. We're rising. This planet is rising to be a planet of greater light. But what really matters is that we, individually, are rising to be a universe within our consciousness of greater and greater light. And in order to build the light, oftentimes we have to exercise it against darkness, don't we? And there's no such thing as statistics. It really doesn't matter what the sickness rate, the death rate is, the transmission rate is. I mean, these are helpful because we have to use our rational minds to sort of figure out what's sensible. But for each of us, how we can be useful to everyone, everything is sent to us to draw us closer to God. If you want to, meet your karma, transcend your karma, and I don't mean to get sick or not get sick or die or not to die, draw closer to God. Get ahead of it. Get ahead of it. Anything that frightens us is because we have something still to learn, don't we? Just as simple as that. If we had nothing to learn, we wouldn't be afraid. I had a flash, and it lasted I was walking up the stairs, and it lasted about as long as it took me to move through 2 steps. It crossed my mind. What would it be like to be afraid of nothing? Master's words, to stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds, to confront someone who has a loaded gun right at you and have no fear of life or death, to hear that a virus is coming, and I have little pictures of it trying to get into my lungs and to make me so I can't breathe. What would it feel like to be absolutely unafraid? Just for a second, 1, 2 steps. Ooh, it was really different than what it feels like normally. But that's what it is. That's what we know is our destiny. So now we have something new to be scared about. It wasn't enough that nuclear war or climate change or the rising seas or the loss of our community. We didn't have enough to do. So now we have a virus, right? And it's not going to be a joke if it really comes. There's going to be a lot of tears and a lot of struggle and a lot of suffering. Don't get me wrong. Cataclysm is not a picnic. But God realization is not for sissies either. It takes a tremendous amount of courage. And eventually, what choice do we have? And how can we help others? And why is God sending this to me? There's 2 ways to ask, why are you doing this to me? Or, why are you doing this to me? And when we can go deep inside ourselves and ask, why are you doing this to me? Oh, I understand. Oh, this is my opportunity. Or, Lord, I'm so frightened. If you don't hold my hand with more tangible presence than you have ever held my hand, I don't think I can live through this. I can't bear it. I can't bear to see people suffering. I can't bear to contemplate the suffering or the loss of my loved ones. You must be with me. So we suffer more than we've suffered before, and then we pray like we've never prayed before. Now, what is bad and what is good gets very confusing, doesn't it? That which drives us to God, is that a curse or a blessing? How we answer that question and how we respond to it instinctively, intuitively, day after day. That's what's being asked of us. Little viruses, if they come, are just God's hand, just reaching out, both cursing and blessing. This is Kali Ma. She has a sword in one hand to sever your head, and the other hand offers you a blessing. I finally sort of got that image. Oh yeah, that's what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like. Whack with the sword, blessing with the other hand. Us in the middle, trying to remember. God bless you.
Lived in many countries and mixed with many men. sunshine, gone with them in the rain. The fires at evening said we were brothers. The fires at evening said we were brothers. A soldier I saw weeping beside a dying friend. My officers had said I must hate him till the end. But seeing his grief I knew we were brothers. But seeing his grief I knew we were brothers.
A man sat on a doorstep to see the children play. The gentle way he smiled there would charm your fears away. A stranger he, but love made us brothers. A stranger he, but love made us brothers.
One day I climbed a mountain with friends of other lands.
The words we used were different, but joy one understands. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. Our gladness in God's world made us brothers. The words and customs vary like waves upon the sea. One life beneath the surface binds everyone to me. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. Who knows the truth knows all men as brothers. Then brothers, why endeavor to set ourselves apart? The fences we've been building squeeze tight upon our hearts. Come sing the truth that all men are brothers. Come sing the truth that